Okay, now we're on an example in lessons 1.4, which is angle measure. Again, look at the vocabulary. As you go through the book, it will tell you what is a ray. A ray is a part of a line. It tells you at the top. It has one end point and extends indefinitely. Notation, look, you can see it's got an arrowhead in the direction that it's going. Sometimes it will have two arrowheads because it's opposite rays. Opposite rays mean that they're going in opposite directions. Today we talked about naming an angle. Well, if you name an angle, if you look at the diagram, it's talking about angle 3 in this case. How else can you label that? Well, either you can call it angle X because X is the vertex. You can call it YXZ. Or you can reverse the letters and put ZYX. But always remember one thing, the middle letter of the three letters that you use must be the vertex. Let's have a look at a real world question. So here we've got a diagram of some sort of roads, etc., an auditorium, faculty parking, library and office. But question A is asking, name all the angles that have B as a vertex. Well, here's B. So we're looking at this angle here. So how else then can we write it? Well, firstly, we can call it angle B. We can call it angle 1. Now using the letters, we can call it angle ABD. And reversing it, angle DBA. Remember, we can change the letters in order, but the middle letter must be the vertex. Now it's your turn. Same diagram. Now we're looking at the sides that make angle 3. What's another name for angle GHL? And name a point in the interior of angle DPK. See what answers you can come up with. Okay, so here we have example 2 and example 1 together. Okay. Again, what I want you to do is look at this. Okay, you've got to classify each angle as a right, acute and obtuse. Going by the information that you've got, remember, acute is less than 90 degrees, a right is 90 degrees, and an obtuse is greater than 90 but 180. Working with that, what I want you to do is classify each of the questions that they've asked here as either a right, acute or an obtuse. The next thing it asks for you to do is to use a protractor to measure the angle. Well, what I want you to do is just have an educated guess, but use information. So for instance, this, which is CFE, is a right angle. Well, if I want you to estimate DFE, you know that it's slightly more than 45 degrees because it's more than an angle bisector. So an educated guess for this would be anything between 60 and 70 degrees. That's the thing that I would like you to do when you do example 1 and example 2 type questions. Okay, other thing that we talked about last week, congruent angles. Don't forget, congruent angles must equal each other or be noted exactly the same. So for instance, if you look at the diagram, this angle here, which is ABC, is 65 degrees with one little red line. The corresponding angle to that is DEF, 65 degrees again, and one line. So that tells me that geometrically they are both the same size, and geometrically we call it congruent. The same as this angle has got two lines, and so has this. So these two angles must also be congruent. Using the information that you know that this is a straight line and that's 65, then angle DEB must be 180 take away 65, which is 115 degrees. Okay, straight away we're back to the algebra part. Even though we're in geometry, it's still going to be a lot of algebra 1, maybe a little bit of algebra 2, but let's have a look what we've got to do. Okay, in example 3, make sure it says measure and classify your angles. What does it tell you? So make sure you fully read the whole of the statement that goes with the questions. In the figure, JK, KM are opposite rays. In other words, these JK and KM opposite rays, which means that must be 180 degrees. This line here, KN, bisects JKL. So there's the angle JKL. This bisects it. From the definition that we've just read, is that this angle here and this angle here must be congruent. So let's have a look at what the question's asking you. It tells you that JKN is 8x minus 13. So JKN is 8x minus 13. The next thing it tells you is NKL is 6x plus 11. So these two guys must equal each other. So from the expressions that they give you here and here, you need to substitute them in to make some sort of algebraic equation. Okay. Next thing, just follow it through. And here on the right hand side is giving you the proof of what you've got to do. You've got to add 18 to both sides. You've got to subtract 6x from both sides. You've got to divide through by 2. It'll give you x equals 12. Is that sufficient for the question? Well, in this question, it is asking you what the value of x is. So x equals 12 is sufficient. If the question here said, what is the value of, or what is the size of angle JKN, then what you would do is substitute x equals 12 back into one of the two equations you've just done, the one that relates to JKN. Well, JKN is that. So if I plug 12 into that, I would get 8 times 12, which is 96. 96 subtract 13, which is 83. So if asked for the size of the angle, I would put 83. But in this case, it's just asking for x. So before you start doing all this algebra, make sure you've read the question and what it is you've actually got to find. So going back to what we've done, here's the beginning. So all 10 questions need to be done. And again, check. Examples 1 covers questions 1 through 4. Example 2 covers 5 through 8. And example 3 covers 9 and 10. If you're not sure, go back to the examples. But make sure, like it says, check for understanding. Make sure you understand what you've got to do. Okay? Going back to questions 5 through 8, it does say use a protractor to measure the angle to the nearest degree. We're back to have an estimate until we do this work with the protractor next lesson. Okay?